So, where we last left off, Ichigo and his friends had successfully rescued Rukia and have returned home and life goes on. But of course, it's not that simple. Bleach is riding a big high at this point. This next portion makes up the R and Car arc, which lasts for over 200 chapters. I have heard that apparently Kubo didn't plan for the arc to last this long, but the R and Cars proved unexpectedly popular, and thus Kubo had to drag it out. Editors really are a tricky thing in shonen. So let's not waste any time. During the late 2000s, early 2010s, Bleach's volume sales dropped 1 million each year from 2009 to 2011, which a lot of people took the meaning that something happened in Bleach around them that turned people off of it. But let's cover the beginning of the R and Car arc. So we seem to be settling back into a normal standard for Bleach. I suppose I'll use this opportunity to talk about Ichigo's classmates outside of the main cast. Kigo is comic relief for the most part, but I find it relatively harmless, and his older sister Mizuho is there. Tadzuki, Orihime's friend, is the sparring partner of Ichigo's. There's a scene that shows that she can see spirits, but I don't know if it ever goes anywhere. There's Chizuru, who likes to sexually harass Orihime. I swear, if she was a boy, this would not fly. In fact, it's still kind of uncomfortable. But Japan has different views on this stuff than America does. Ichigo and his friends are attacked by the mysterious Espada, and some interesting plot reveals happen, such as the reveal that Ichigo's father is a Soul Reaper. Well played, Kubo. The 10th Espada absolutely shatters Ichigo, so he starts training under some rogue Soul Reapers. What follows is Ichigo fighting as Hollow. Basically, as Hollow lectures him about instinct. Basically, fight with passion, which doesn't really seem nearly all that wise. So basically what happens in this section, the Espadas attack, Rukia and a bunch of captains come back to help Ichigo in the event that the Espada attack again, which they do twice. Okiura, the lead rival for Ichigo in this arc, tells Orihime that she must give herself up. She does, and Ichigo and his friends go off to Hokomundo to save her. So far nothing seems too bad, but we're entering the Hokomundo arc. Before we get into the plot beats, I'll comment on Hokomundo. Yeah, there's nothing there. I think that's the intention, but it also really just highlights how Kubo just doesn't do backgrounds. In many ways, I find his character artwork to be superior to both Oda and Kishimoto's, but the lack of backgrounds really hurt the series. Not to mention, from what I understand, isn't it usually the assistants who do backgrounds? Does Kubo have assistants? So originally Yamamoto refuses to let any of the captains accompany Ichigo to rescue Orihime, but then Yamamoto later changes his mind and sends Rukia and Renji to help. Yeah, I've noticed that high-ranking people in shonens tend to be terrible at their job. So this devolves into more fights with the Espadas, and I think everyone who has reviewed Bleach has pointed out here that, yeah, Bleach starts to get repetitive. I'll just let them sum it up.
In which Ichigo and his friends must enter a world they don't understand, face down an ancient and patriarchal society in a desperate battle to rescue their friend. Sound familiar?
The catalyst for the beginning of the story is the abduction of a main female character. The main characters are separated as soon as they infiltrate the enemy's stronghold. A short ways into the adventure, a cutesy comic relief character with healing abilities joins up with Ichigo. Ishida fights a mad scientist. One of Ichigo's rivals has a bizarre hair color and markings around the eyes and is the most sympathetic villain in the arc, while the other is pale-skinned, dark-haired, eternally condescending, and comes into conflict with the first rival. Rukia is haunted by memories of her fallen lieutenant. Chad utterly destroys a minor villain whose name nobody remembers and then immediately loses to a more powerful foe. Renji loses to everyone.
Yeah, now granted, I think the reason for this is because each shonen likes to follow a formula. It's just with Bleach that's the most notable. I find a lot of the fights with the Espadas to be good. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing any of these wrong. Rukia's fight with Aranoro is probably my favorite of the bunch. It was great to see her put her demons to rest. A couple of the other fights were good or just serviceable. A lot of people take issue with the fact that the captains had to come and bail out the main cast, and that does become a huge problem later on. At first I took it as a sign that our heroes weren't on the same level as these captains yet. And that's fine, there's still plenty of room to grow. But unfortunately, at the end of this arc, that wouldn't seem to be the case. Let's talk about Chad. As mentioned in each arc, his story has been, he defeats a minor villain whose name nobody remembers, and then immediately loses to a more powerful foe. Then he comes back and doesn't really do much. So that leads me to ask, why is he billed as a main character? I guess it's like Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation. Every time he got owned, it was meant to show that the villain of the week was really tough, but since he hasn't really had any true victories, he's lost all credibility at this point. This part of the arc took a while to really get going. Here's something that seriously bugs me with Kubo, his over-reliance on double-page spreads. Now, the use of a double-page spread is typically to show that something big has happened. Except it loses its punch when you do it all the time. Nothing feels big because nothing feels small. and it seriously just slows down the pacing of this arc to a crawl. Another thing that's been pointed out to me is that Kubo really likes to step up the arm maiming, which is pretty much the go-to limb disjointment in shonen. I guess it's just easy, and it's not too violent, and they can get away with it in these silly comics that are meant for children. Now let's cover Ichigo's fight with Grimjaw. Unfortunately, I don't find Grimjaw to be a particularly memorable rival. There's an attempt to flesh him out, but he gets killed off before it can really go anywhere. I did like moments of the fight that were really badass. This part of the arc concludes when Aizen heads to Karakura Town and blocks the heroes from following him. Basically, he plans to annihilate the town as part of a ritual to meet and kill God. Yeah, that's about what I'd expect the main villain of Bleach to have as their motivation. But he finds the rest of the Soul Society captains there waiting for him. Alright, good, I thought. We had to sit through all that padding, and now finally we get to the good stuff, and instead we get a flashback. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, this turn back the pendulum flashback is actually pretty damn awesome. It's very interesting, intriguing, and it's rather interesting to look into things before the series proper began. It's just such a cruel tease. We were just about to get to the good stuff, and then boom, flashback. Although, I'd say of all the shonen flashbacks I've read, Turn Back the Pendulum might be my favorite. Alright, so we're back. Yamamoto and the captains are facing down Aizen and his subordinates, and Ichigo is finally confronting Ukihara to rescue Orihime. So finally, at long last, the arc is climaxing. About time, because this arc is seriously starting to drag. Let's get this moving, and then some unimportant characters fight instead. Yeah, the lower lieutenants are fighting. We know these fights don't really matter because all the ones who do are just floating there. I seriously suspect Kubo was like, alright, I got the big fights in place, but I need more time to plan them out, so I'll just have some other fights happen until I'm ready for the bigger fights. Yeah, there's a couple things going on here, like Ikkaku's character arc progresses a little bit. So finally, the captains join the fight, and they still don't do anything. Instead, some minor things happen, then the Espada decide to finally fight seriously. Then, we cut to Ichigo instead. Now, admittingly, finally, we're getting something important. But yeah, Kubo keeps hyping out that the captains are going to fight Aizen soon, and yet we still don't get that. It's just so agonizing. As much shit as I gave Kishimoto for the long wait for Naruto versus Sasuke, at least he didn't do like so many false starts. So the fight between Ichigo and Okihara is... it's fine. I mean, you got Ishida and Orihime watching the fight. Ichigo's doing pretty badly, but he's Ichigo, so he thinks he can still win. So Ukihara decides to turn into... whatever the hell this is. Still looks better than Sasuke's gargoyle form, I'd say. So yeah, the fight is going badly. Okihara blows a hole straight through Ichigo's chest. Yeah, this is bad. But with how absurd Bleach healing tends to be, I mean, it's like a whole nother level. You can regenerate lost limbs in this series from what I can see. So finally, Orihime is going to step up. She's had this character arc about getting stronger, now it's time for it all to pay off. Ishida's dying, Ichigo's dying, Orihime's powers have been evolving. This is the moment, the payoff, the part where you look at the character and go, yeah, this was all worth it. She's gonna do something, and it's gonna be good, and now our heroine Orihime will... start crying for Ichigo to save her. Okay, I'm seriously getting Sakura flashbacks here to when she cried to Sasuke to stop despite not knowing a thing about him. I know this happened first, but I can't help but be reminded. Kubo, you've had Orihime bring someone back from the dead. Why can't you just do that here? Why is she calling out for Ichigo to save her while he's lying on the ground dying from a massive hole in his chest? He's the one who needs saving! Does every shonen have this moment where they take a female character, have them go through character development, and then at the critical juncture they take a massive dump all over it? This is the last thing Orihime really gets to do in this arc, and she just doesn't look good. What was the point of making her such a big focus? Her abilities turn out to not be significant to the plot. Aizen even says he has no more use for her. She has no role in the final battle, and as a damsel in distress, she's not as effective as Rukia. Rukia changed Ichigo's life, and he felt that he owed her a tremendous debt, so he bought into their bond. Orihime is close to Ichigo as a friend, a comrade, and yes, I know they end up married in the epilogue, but I'll get to that. But you can't just use Orihime in that role without building her up to be that important. So yeah, Orihime joins the long list of promising female characters undone by sexism from their writers. Or as Y Ruler of Time put it, and I will quote, "Push up your rack and cry for your man as feminism marches right the fuck on." By the way, I got his permission to use that quote for my Naruto critique. So don't go saying I stole it, I got permission. So Ichigo magically comes back to life and pretty much owns Ukiura. Then Ichigo regains control of himself, sees Ukiura, and demands his arm and leg be cut off so it's a fair fight. Ugh. Now, I know people criticize Ichigo saying that he has no character arc. I'd say that he does. It's that he feels weak in his desire to want to protect his friends, coming into conflict with the fear of his own strength. Every time Ichigo activates his hollow form, he basically loses control of himself, and he doesn't like winning off a power that isn't truly his. That's why his victory over Ukiura frustrates him. It wasn't a victory he truly earned. But unfortunately, I find this deconstruction of Ichigo's character to not be particularly well written. The idea was there, the execution just wasn't all that. With that, Ukiura dies. It's meant to be in a last poor villain moment, and his last thoughts are of... I really hope you weren't paid for this page, Kubo. Meanwhile, Rukia, Renji, and Chad are fighting this big monster whose name I don't remember. Does it even get resolved? Let's talk about Rukia for a minute here. Rukia was definitely the female lead of Bleach, but once her backstory issues were all resolved, it was like Kubo didn't know what to do with her except to show her occasionally worrying about Ichigo. It's like Sakura all over again. Does every shonen have this problem? How's Nami doing in One Piece? I haven't read in a while. Then there's this guy, Hitsuga. For he regularly ranks as the most popular Bleach character in Japan. I have no idea why, because he is not interesting in the slightest. Apparently he just looks cool to them, so yeah, Japan likes their pretty boys. So now the remaining 3 Espada, who are all said to be stronger than Ukiura, see, they don't go from 1 to 10, they go from 0 to 9. Yeah, okay. Anyway, they get defeated very anticlimactically. Aizen just outright guts one of them for no real reason. I mean, these guys are said to be stronger than Ukiura, and Ichigo had to do... this massive explosion to put him down. Here, these guys are just defeated with Deus Ex Machinas. Or as Bleach fans like to call it, Plot Kai. Yeah, Naruto fans call it Plot no Jutsu. Everyone has to have a name now to be cute. But now it's time for the main event. Ichigo joins the battlefield and they all form a united front against Aizen. At long last, it's time for our main villain to cut loose. No more waiting, no more padding. Let's do this, and Aizen just kind of beats everybody without breaking a sweat. I'm getting Madara flashbacks here. Aizen's whole bankai is that he can make illusions, which means he can do whatever the hell Kubo needs him to do. Maybe this is why Death Battle hasn't done Madara versus Aizen. It'd be an unstoppable force versus an immovable object. Whose broken bullshit would break the others? Actually, I want to see Saitama from One Punch Man fight both of them. So basically this whole stretch is nothing but Aizen completely owning everyone. Like there's this one part where he tricks everyone into stabbing Himamura instead of him. He completely withstands Yamamoto going all out. You ever realize just how inept the Soul Society captains really are at their jobs? So anyway, the Hokyo evolves and Aizen turns into... This must have taken you like, what, 5 seconds to draw, Kubo? Then he evolves again, he decides to go to real Karakura Town. But Ichigo's father and some other allies show up and Aizen owns them too. Also, Aizen reveals that he has planned Ichigo's entire life. Okay, that came out of left field. I asked some people in my Discord if this ever came up again, and apparently it does. A bit. Just a bit. So yeah, this is so out of nowhere. Here's the thing, Aizen and Ichigo really don't have much of an enemy, despite Ichigo being the main character and Aizen being the main villain. So I guess this was done so that there would be some history, but this barely, if ever, gets brought up again. It's about on par with Karin being the Uzumaki for out-of-nowhere plot twists that end up meaning absolutely nothing to the overall plot. Not to mention the next arc would fly in the face that Aizen was the cause of Chad's power, and apparently he's the reason Orihime has her powers too. So yeah, well, at least it's not an alien being the source of all life. So Aizen heads to real Karakura Town, and the following chapters are all titled Deicide, which really just highlights how long it takes for this fight to finish. But as Ichigo chases after Aizen and Jin with his father, Isshin tells Ichigo in this dimension time moves differently, and thus he can teach him an amazing forbidden technique. How very convenient. So it follows as Aizen just kind of stalking Ichigo's classmates, like maybe instead he could be chasing after Ichigo's sisters, thus giving Ichigo an even more personal reason to stop Aizen. Here's my issue with this segment. Aizen spends more time stalking Ichigo's classmates than he actually does fighting Ichigo. Jin tries to betray Aizen, but he ends up dying, and I gotta be honest, I really thought Jin's motivations were poorly fleshed out, and his death is played up as a tragedy, and I'm like, okay? Also, just why does this sequence happen? The Afro Soul Reaper shows up and tries to stop Aizen? I just remember reading that and going, that was pointless. So, finally, Ichigo shows up and he pretty much kicks Aizen's ass. The only part I think I found very cool is when Aizen refuses to move and Ichigo just makes him move anyway. And I must admit, Aizen's villainous breakdown is immensely satisfying. The sheer fact that a human could surpass him is just unthinkable to him. So Ichigo turns into Super Saiyan 3, but a mummy? That is basically what this is. He decides to use his final attack, Moongetsu. This will take away Ichigo's powers and make him an ordinary human again. So the attack is made, Ichigo loses his powers, Aizen's still not done, but he gets sealed away because Urahara nerfed him, and Ichigo expresses some pity for him, which really just falls flat in my opinion. So finally, at long last, Aizen is sentenced to 20,000 years in prison. Why not just kill him? Ichigo wakes up and he and Rukia bid a final goodbye. And with that, the Arrancar arc finally comes to a close. What can one possibly say about it? Well, for me, this whole stretch was really what caused people to turn off of Bleach. The conflict with Aizen, after 7 years of build-up, just not a satisfying conclusion for many. Aizen just proved to be a rather disappointing villain. He had the potential to be one of Shonen's best villains, but instead, he's often regarded as one of the worst. It's probably not a coincidence that during this time, Bleach's volume sales dropped by 1 million each year. Let's go into some basic problems that Kubo tends to have when writing Bleach. You may have noticed that with each arc, the cast of Bleach increases exponentially. For example, we start off with a main cast of 5, with Ichigo's family and classmates serving as supporting characters. Then you get to Soul Society and the cast size more than doubles. Then with this arc, the cast size tripled with the Espadas and all the other groups. From what I gather, Kubo's way of dealing with writer's block is to introduce a brand new character. Based on the sheer number of them, it seems he had writer's block very often. It's not just that Kubo introduces an awesome new character, he introduces a whole group of them. You had 13 captains who each had a lieutenant, for example. What's worse is Kubo's focus on the main cast is incredibly erratic, like I mentioned. He pushed Rukia and Chad to the side when it seemed he didn't know what to do with them, and instead of doing these big events with his main cast, he instead does them with his supporting cast. Here's the thing, I don't consider Bleach to be necessarily terrible, but it's really held down by atrocious pacing, like I said. This arc stretched from volume 22 to volume 48. The fake Karakura portion begins at chapter 317. The ending is chapter 423. In that span of 107 chapters, 34 are just the fight with Aizen. Say what you will about Naruto, but at least I thought the manga was paced pretty well. Until you get to the war arc, of course, but I already talked about that. You see, One Piece and Naruto, for all their ups and downs, maintained loyal followings, but Bleach? Oof, you really couldn't say that. You see, while I don't think this arc was what truly finished Bleach for a lot of people, it was the start of the end. Kubo just didn't deliver in the clutch for what was hyped up to be his big moment. When you don't deliver a good ending, people seem to fall off the series, as evidenced by what happened with Game of Thrones last year. But this wasn't quite the end of Bleach. We still got the full-body Asian arc to go, and this arc was for many the last nail in the coffin. Reportedly, this arc was during the 10th year anniversary of Bleach, and its publication was very hard on Kubo, and we're about to see why, as next time we cover Bleach, we will be doing the full-body Asian arc. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please hit that bell, like, and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, which are provided in the description below. See you next time.